yeah, that is objectively rude, and it's okay for me to feel the way that I feel, but I'm not going to allow it to drive me into some
To
spiral
rule
of
you.
right.
Yeah.
So that's almost goes full circle to why we have to name these emotions in the
Yeah.
first place, because if you don't name them, if you don't know them, then you're not able to analyze them and go into why you're feeling the way that you feel.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I didn't know this was a fight.
That's why you're losing.
Today we are beginning either to domesticate the devil or else to deny him. He is most powerful when he is denied.
Welcome to The Devil is in the Details. The devil may be in the details, but God is on the throne.
Amen. God is on the throne indeed.
We are in episode 5 of the Discernment of Spirit series, which may be confusing because this is rule 4, but that's because we did 2 shows on rule 2.
Right.
So I would encourage everyone to go back and listen to those. And of course, if you find these helpful, drop a comment, like, subscribe. It's super helpful. We're very close at the time of this recording. I'm very close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So that'll be great.
Very cool.
Yep.
So rule the fourth, or the fourth rule, St. Ignatius, and how do demons work in desolation? Like, what do they do? What are they seeking to do? How does that happen? And rule the fourth. That's the way the translation reads. So I always say it the weird way. But Ignatius says that it's darkness of the soul, disturbance, movement to low and earthly things, disquiet from various agitations and temptations, moving to lack of confidence, hopelessness, finding oneself slothful, tepid, sad, and as if separated from one's Creator and Lord. So first of all, it's important to say that the as if statement is pretty important. We are actually not separated from God when we get attacked in this way. It just feels like it.
Mm-hmm.
In desolation, the enemy's voice is very strong, compelling, loud, ominous, controlling. The illustration I always remember is Sauron, or is it Saruman or Sauron? Who is the counterpart to Gandalf in Lord of the Rings? Saruman is the warlock, and when he speaks, you have to be, when he's bad and he speaks, when he's good and he speaks, that's not a bad thing. When he's bad and he speaks, which he did in the story Turned, his words are not just persuasive at the intellectual level, but they have a spiritual weight to them that draws you into whatever reality he's trying to draw you into. So that feeling also, it heightens this sense that God is not present because it just feels so dark.
Okay.
Now, in terms of summarizing all of these things, darkness of the soul, disturbance, movement, and all that, it's the easiest way to remember the distinction between consolation and desolation. We covered consolation in the last show. Is consolation leads you to faith, hope, and love. Desolation leads you to doubt, despair, and narcissism. So those are like at the macro level umbrella things, right? But one of the things I found, and I don't know, so part of your journey, let's do it this way, because I think it's super helpful to talk about your journey, is this process of you becoming awake spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
But becoming awake spiritually also awakens you psychologically. What does that mean? It means that historically, so when a person suffers abuse, or they don't mature well in their context of their upbringing, and you didn't because of the abuse, you had, I would say, a portion of your childhood was okay, and the rest of it wasn't so okay. You did suffer that abuse. So when that occurs, you aren't very well in touch with your emotions. You don't understand them.
Right.
So talk about so there's been a process for you of going from being oblivious to all the crap within you and whatever the enemy's doing to becoming awake. Was it Bethesda that woke you up to more specific detail to your interior life?
Yeah. The first thing though was, well, maybe it was Bethesda. I'm trying to think back through my therapy journey.
And that's a treatment center Jordan went to, just for reference.
Because I've been to so many different types of therapy and therapists. I think it was actually in Bethesda where I was given the emotions wheel, which if you imagine this wheel, that's like a pie chart. It's cut up into a bunch of different sections, and it's colored, to kind of differentiate. So you would have on the outer edge of this wheel, you would have anger, happiness, sadness, so on. And then one level into the wheel, you would have those larger emotions, quote unquote, split into smaller emotions. So more descriptors. So angry could be frustrated. They're under the same umbrella. They're not necessarily
so
the same
anger,
thing.
sad, those are macro feelings that have a subset of more distinct specific nuances of feelings.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And so the deeper you went into the circle or the pie chart, however you want to imagine it, the more precise or nuanced it would become.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
And the thing that helped me with that was I had always operated and even joked about operating between anger and happiness. Those were the only two emotions I knew. That's all I could comprehend, not recognizing that there's all these smaller aspects and these nuances of these emotions. And for me, when I was able to differentiate and better explain, when I was given the language to say, no, I'm not angry, I'm frustrated, or that's just the one that keeps coming to mind. I'm not,
And what's the difference between anger and frustration? I mean, I know what the definition.
Well, for me,
dictionary says.
Yeah, it's just levels. You know what I mean? Where I think prior, if I thought about if there was anything that frustrated me, I would just be angry. And so I wouldn't question anything or think about what was going on. It was just this red anger, right? Or if I was happy, I was just happy. I wasn't, joyful and I recognize that may come off to some people like, oh, it's a little, you're going into semantics, but it is important to have that language, because what happened was when I was given that language, I was better able to articulate and analyze what I was feeling. So it's not just this broad anger. It's not just this broad happiness or sadness. It's, oh, I am, anxious would be huge. I think that was under maybe, and that actually may have been under anger, may have been under sorrow. I don't really recall. But the point is, once you have the language and you recognize that it's not as simple as, black and white, anger, happy, sad, there's other things involved. There's different layers and there's different levels. Then, you can better differentiate and then analyze what has both caused it and how you're responding to whatever input you're receiving that's causing that emotion.
And so why is all this important? The reason is, I mean, I went through something similar. I can't remember if I mentioned it in this show or in one of the classes at the Evel Institute or what, but I remember a woman specifically when I was working at a Christian bookstore after I come to know Jesus. And she said, why are you always so anxious or stressed or tense, something like that. And I thought, well, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Right.
I was irritated with her and like, whatever.
Right.
I'm not. Well, the reason I was saying that was because I was numb in a sense. Like, I was not aware of how tense, because she was right. I was tense all the time, but to me that was normal.
Right.
Because of how I grew up. And so it took me a while, mostly for me, totally non-therapy context, just a female relationship, like with Stephanie, my wife, the woman you call mom. It's your stepmother for those who are listening, but we don't do the step thing.
Yeah.
That's helped me tremendously, right? But also mental prayer, just the normal things of the spiritual life have helped me be able to better understand what's going on inside of me and the gradations of the issues and discernment of spirits, like we're talking about today. Because in a second, I'm going to go a deep dive on these words that Ignatius uses.
Yeah.
But my whole point. Oh, go ahead. You have a thought.
I think I'm thinking about an analogy that might help this make a little bit more sense, because I feel like I'm kind of failing at articulating the message that I'm trying to get at. If you were trying to write a story, but you only had third grade vocabulary,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a great story.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you've grown and you've matured and you can understand
Yeah.
$10 words and
Yeah.
things like that, then you can write a really good story.
Right. You can be more precise and more descriptive and more
Yes.
nuanced.
And that's what I'm trying to get at with this difference between, the macro and the micro. It is important, and it provides a broader context.
So the reason I'm doing this is because I've taught discernment spirits for years, and a really common thing I find, mostly with men, women if they've suffered abuse, but very common with men, is I read when the soul, darkness of the soul, disturbance, movement to low, they go, I don't know any of those things.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, it's not true. I mean, it's just, so because I could just talk to them and dig it out. So what I decided to do is take those macro words, kind of like you're angry, and then and then use a bunch of descriptors, synonyms, so that people could then identify, oh, that one,
Yeah.
oh, that one.
Yeah.
Because when you start, I don't know if this happened to you when you had the macro and then you saw the subset, you could go, oh, yeah, that one.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So it's anger, but it's really that, right? So here's the list. Disturbed, and these are just the words Ignatius used to talk about how the demon affects you, how it feels. So that's what we're looking at, and it's why it's important is you have to be aware of how it feels when the enemy moves.
Right.
So that's the importance of it. It's not just a psychological thing that has no benefit other than you just becoming better equipped to deal with your emotions.
Well, not to jump ahead too far, but I also think, and I'll throw it out. We can leave it at this. Just knowing what it is, being able to label it really precisely, sometimes is enough to stop it from happening.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm curious as we go through these. Tell me if there are words when you started this journey that would have resonated with you. So the first word is disturbed, agitated, distressed, or disrupted.
Yeah, agitated would have been one that would have popped out.
Okay, disquieted, lack of calm or peace, anxiety or uneasiness.
Yeah, anxiety for sure.
Agitated, excited, disturbed, irritated or anxious.
Yeah, irritated, anxious probably.
Tempted, enticed to unwise, immoral, or sinful thoughts or acts.
Yeah, I think that resonates with that
general category, right? Unconfident, which is afraid, anxious, hesitant, troubled, or unsure. Which one?
Unsure, probably. If I was to just, pick one out.
Okay. Hopeless, despairing, impossible, unable, no way out.
Despairing is a powerful one. No way out, I can see really resonating with people. I'm kind of leaving I know the exercise was for me to pick out for myself, but now I'm thinking of conversations that I've had with people and the words that they've described.
Yeah.
Because often, and again, I may be jumping ahead, but you'll speak to someone and they'll describe, I feel like there's no way out. And then that's how you can clue in and say, you're in desolation.
Yes, exactly. Lazy, slothful, disinclined to spiritual work, activity, or exertion. Now that mostly happened because of your falling away. Tepid, lukewarm, characterized by a lack of force or enthusiasm as it relates to spiritual things.
Yeah.
Sad, unhappy, sorrowful, mournful, somber, dark, or down.
Yeah, sorrowful and down for sure.
Yeah. Alone, feeling separated or apart, isolated without aid or help.
Isolated.
Separated, it's rejected, discarded, divided, or other.
Discarded.
Wow.
Now I'm thinking about
that's a painful
stuff
word.
I've covered in therapy even recently.
Yeah.
Going back to the past.
That's a painful
It's
word.
very painful. Yeah.
Yikes. So you can see, I mean, obviously for those listening or watching, you can see what's happening with Jordan. Even that last one touched an emotion. I could feel it.
Yeah.
When I don't know, when you identify with, it's like, oh, that's painful. Yeah. So that's the importance to know the breakout. And so if you're listening and you're thinking, well, how does desolation affect me? Just rewind and listen to all of those synonyms and write down the ones that popped out at you. And then that's how when the enemy is messing with you, that's where he's going to tend to trigger. And all of those words represent wounds of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say one of the other reasons why this is so important is because every good lie has a little bit of truth.
Right.
And so we have to also recognize that this desolation is not just strictly the enemy attacking us. It's also recognition, as you said, there's a wound there. There's something else that needs to be addressed. It's not this like, I just got punched in the face. It's I'm experiencing this because the enemy wants to hurt me, but God is also calling me to something else. There's a wound there that needs to be healed. So I'm allowing him to, cause that desolation.
Right. And the fundamental strategy in the first rules after rule 1, rules 2 through 14, if you remember, are for somebody going intensely from good to better, is to dissuade you from a good path.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can also just be to oppress you, just in general, to just press against you and, try to control you. But generally speaking, it's if you're on a good path because you're fighting sin, going from good to better, some aspect of this is going to come. And so, as you noted, when it comes, it's an invitation of God, because God doesn't cause desolation, but he allows it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the first rule, he does cause a discomfort in the soul who is living in habitual mortal sin. But rules 2 through 14, the person's at least fighting that sin.
Mm-hmm.
So he's allowing desolation, and there are various reasons. We'll talk about that in rule 9. But generally speaking, it's about dissuading you from a good and positive spiritual path, or controlling you to entice you to sin.
Yeah.
Not complicated.
Yeah.
So that's what desolation is. Anything else you want to cover on defining desolation? I think another one would be helpful. I can't remember if we talked about this in the last show or one previously. If you're doing an examine on a daily basis, which is, I had to do it 3 times a day for a long time, to ask the question, where am I? Am I in consolation, desolation? Where am I? And the scale is, 0, below the line, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. -1 is mild desolation. -5 is really severe desolation. 0 is consolation, because there's no desolation.
Mm-hmm. And can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know, because this is something that I've had to learn very recently, something I've worked through with my therapist, is there are sometimes that let me back up. I think that consolation, when people hear that, they immediately associate it with happy feelings.
Yeah.
And good and joy.
And we covered that in the last show. It can be conviction,
right?
But it's always purifying, healing, and the presence of God is there.
Right. And so that consolation can sometimes just be I don't really feel anything. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because I asked her, I said, is it normal to like my baseline is She goes, yeah. It's not,
right.
It's not, that's okay.
It is okay.
And it doesn't mean, does not mean desolation.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to get at.
God,
Yeah. Which is, praise God. That's better than being in desolation.
Yeah.
So there can be a normative kind of meh that you're at, and that's not necessarily a negative thing.
Bad, yeah.
And you can still be in consolation.
Right.
So that's just something I want to cover.
Yeah. So, because it's not negative, it's not
Right.
below 0, it's just 0.
Right.
Which is great. And 0 and above is good.
Yeah.
So that's what desolation is. So when the enemy presses in, he's seeking to dissuade you, discourage you, tempt you to sin, or whatever. These things you'll feel. Before we end this discussion about desolation, how have you found it normatively works in your life? Like, how does it affect you? When does it come?
Yeah.
At this stage, which, by the way, desolation changes in the way it works in the soul, depending on where you are spiritually mature. maturity wise, both psychologically and spiritually. But anyway,
when it's most obvious for me, it's not a punch in the face, so to speak. It's not one big giant thing. It's a lot of little things.
Mm.
And thank God I've come to notice that, okay, I just had 5 small annoyances back to back first thing in the morning. I'm probably in desolation, or I'm being tempted to desolation, whatever
Sure.
the case may be. And thankfully I'm more on guard, but that's how it hits me. It's a bunch of little stuff at once that are like minor irritations or something along those lines. And then I'm keyed in. Okay. Yeah, there's something I need to be aware of here.
Are there any wounds that you still have that people in your life, close or peripheral, can easily draw you to desolation if you're not careful? And you don't have to like name names.
That's actually a really good question. Not necessarily. I do know that there are certain things, if I'm not really on guard. So for instance, if you and I both have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's like fertile ground for desolation.
Right.
So people need to know that, and give yourself grace.
When you're physiologically tired.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? Hungry, angry.
Yeah. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored.
Lonely, tired. And if you're always tired.
Yeah. It's way easier.
Yeah. Right.
We had a great Dominican priest with us for a long time who we had a long conversation. He said, Jordan, you need to understand, give yourself grace. You're tired.
Yeah.
This is what happens. He said, you have no clue how much more prone you are to desolation when you're just tired.
Yeah.
So that's, for all those out there, repeating it for myself as well, give yourself grace. But, what was I saying? So where were we at?
So I asked you the question, is there anyone in your life?
Oh, yes. Okay. So if I'm not totally on guard, which is what led to the tired thing, there are certain little things that could trigger me that way towards desolation. So if I'm talking to somebody, if we're having a discussion and they cut me off, which sounds like a very minor thing, but it's very disrespectful. It's hey, I have something to say that's more important than what you have to say. Or it's really evident that this is where it really gets me. If it's evident that the person wasn't listening and then they cut me off, I'm like, okay, well, I'm unimportant. Why am I talking?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it taps into that wound of this, like, oh, I'm not important. I'm discarded.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever, dude. Like, I'm going to talk now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is something that could cause that taps into that wound that can cause that desolation. But normally I'm aware enough to say, okay, well, this is just annoying, and let it be what it is and go on my way. And I need to pray for that person, not let it affect me. So is that kind of...
Yeah. There's a couple of things in all of this that I think are important to note. One is you're pretty awake. Staying awake is hard. Yeah. We've talked about that a lot, but you seem to be pretty awake, which is the way you, of course, get awake is the normal Catholic practices, sound sacramental life, mental prayer in particular, the exam, and those things are the most powerful awake, tools to keep you awake. Is that how you stay awake, or why are you able to see or know what's going on instead of just getting sucked into it?
So that what you just said is the foundation. I don't think you have any possibility of staying awake without that foundation. Maybe minor, rare cases, but those would be the exception to the rule. You have to have the sacraments to keep you founded within truth. But what I do is, when I am experiencing something that is causing me some sort of emotional reaction, I will sit with it and analyze it. Why am I feeling that way? What am I feeling in this moment? What may have caused that? Sometimes that's obvious. Is that connected to something? And I'm going through it. And a lot of the times I'm making sure to question myself. Okay, am I crazy? Am I just imagining this? I'm not just going in and saying, well, I feel like I was just thrown to the side, therefore it's true. It's okay. I feel like I was thrown. Okay, well, and even giving them the benefit of the doubt. Well, maybe they had a hard day, maybe, whatever, but still saying, yeah, that is objectively rude, and it's okay for me to feel the way that I feel, but I'm not going to allow it to drive me into some spiral.
To rule you.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's almost goes full circle to why we have to name these emotions in the first place, because if you don't name them, if you don't know them, then you're not able to analyze them and go into why you're feeling the way that you feel.
That makes sense. So the other aspect of this that I think is important is there are going to be some people listening who go, well, why would you say there's a demon that's associated with these feelings? And, whenever that happens, our modernity has been inflicted with a disease, and that is the disbelief in the supernatural. And the supernatural is the church spends a great deal of time on that because it's real.
Right.
Jesus wasn't, I watched, I read a book by a modern psychologist who runs actually a Catholic university, which is kind of sad. And he said that the devil is a psychological construct. And I'm thinking, so then Jesus is a nut, because who was he arguing with in the desert?
Right. Right.
And he might say, well, the writers were just using that as, whatever. But having been in exorcisms, I know that the devil is not a psychic.
Right.
Having seen supernatural things in my life and exorcism and outside, I know he's not a psychological construct. But there's people who tend to just want to explain these things away. Why does that happen? Well, they're uncomfortable with it.
Right.
One. Two, if they believe it, now they have got to do something about it. Different
which I
than
think
they're
is the
comfortable.
big one. I think that's the biggest one.
Right. They just don't want to deal with it.
Right.
But is it possible that you could be disinclined to well, let's see. Let's use a different one. Tepid, which is lukewarm, lack of force or enthusiasm. Like, I am really tired right now.
Yeah.
So physiologically, I'm tired. Is that a demon? No, I don't think so.
Right.
But I'm in a state, and this goes to something you said earlier. I am in a state whereby I could be easily manipulated into different kinds of sin that occur when you're tired.
Right.
And I don't have any. So the thing about living a discerning life, if you will, or being awake is going, yeah, I'm tired. Yeah. So I need to be careful. I need to, go take a nap if I can and catch up for a little half-hour thing to try to catch up so that and I have to look ahead at my calendar and think how much mental capacity I'm going to need for this or that or whatever.
It almost goes to the core of stay sober and alert. It's not necessarily saying don't be drunk all the time. It's which of course don't.
No, but sober isn't about, it's about being vigilant.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting. So for me, I'll give you an example of some of like a potential desolation for me today is I have to deal with, I hate administrative stuff, which is just, it's sort of too bad.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I have to deal with insurance for the retreat center. There's some big problem with, we pay it, the bank pays it, and then we pay it twice, or we pay it and then the bank charges us even though we prove we paid it. So we're paying twice the amount. So it's just this huge number. It's $35,000. Now it's because the retreat center is on, 64 acres and whatever. But if you can imagine a $35,000 insurance bill every year, twice is very painful. And yeah, so I've got to go meet with the bank. I got to go talk to somebody who has authority instead of just running around with people, so I'm tired and I get this urgent email and I got to deal with it. But we never got a resolution last year. Like, when are we going to get the money back that we are paid? Because it's been double paid. Right. So anyway, so that has, just even talking about that emotionally, I don't like it. Right. Can we pay it twice? Yes, God be praised. But what a joke. I don't want to, now I have 2 years 2 years where somebody's got 35 grand more than they should. Now it's 70. Right. At the end of the year. And so it's, it's just a mess. So anyway, those are some of the things that bother me. Sometimes it's relational, personal. Not as much anymore, relational, personal. I don't.
What's interesting about that?
What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Right.
Just as I'm complaining about being cut off.
Right. That was humorous.
Yeah, I know. Right. It's the irony of
doesn't
sin.
bother me a bit.
It's a different context of the podcast, right? Or at least that's what I tell myself. I feel that the personal relational one comes only after you've already been primed by a bunch of other small stuff.
Interesting.
At least for me.
For you, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll have, tech stuff always drives me nuts. It's like you have one job.
Yes. I hate that too.
Bad, and it puts me in the red.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, this is silly. So I have 5 different tech things that go wrong, which I've had multiple times.
Yeah.
And then I have something that's personal, some sort of relational thing.
In the mix.
Yeah. And then that's where I'm really have to be aware, because that's the one that's going to cause the most damage. Me being mad at my computer is not going to cause any damage. I'm just not going to throw it in the lake or anything, although I've been tempted. But now I'm primed so that when the enemy comes in totally and pokes somebody and they say something silly, or they say something true and I misinterpret it because I'm already
that's a common issue.
So there's this that's I don't know if that's probably resonates with other people. I gotta imagine, because I don't think it's just me.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting aspect of desolation that I didn't even have on the radar to talk about, but it does, because we do this in the divine. Stephanie and I do this in divine intimacy and marriage retreats. We talk about how, and Ripperger talks about this, how the enemy will distort words coming from another and make you hear something that isn't what they said. And I have literally, as Stephanie has too, you may have had this experience too. I read an email somewhat quickly, and I read it as it, and in my head it says XYZ, and it is not even close when I slow down and sit down and stop and read it in detail
multiple times.
Crazy. And we're not a bunch of wimpy, lunatic, overly emotional people, you and I, right? So what is that? Well, it's demonic. But in the marriage relationship, Father Epicurus gives this great example of a wife wants to give her husband, bless him with breakfast in bed.
Oh yeah. Was this Gallagher? I feel like
I'm pretty sure it was. Well, who knows? Either way, let's give them both credit. How's that?
That's good.
So wife says to husband who's in bed, honey, when are you getting out of bed? What does he hear? You lazy pig.
Yeah.
And then snaps back at her.
Yeah.
And worst moment, because the wife's like, oh, I love you, I want to help you.
Yeah.
And then you get punched in the face with words or whatever. So it's just, that's the way the enemy works when you're in desolation. He distorts reality. He presses down upon you with all these negative feelings and negative instincts, negative, motivations to do the wrong thing and all of that. So the remainder of the rules that we're going to deal with, rules 5 through 14, are going to talk about different strategies to use as your 2 things. One, experiencing desolation, and you've already alluded to a few of them. Experiencing desolation, and then also the fluctuation in and out of consolation, desolation, and then what we should be doing with respect to our minds and our hearts. So as we get into the series, and I will say this for those listening, the most important rule is the one we're going to talk about on the next show.
Yes.
Which is the 5th rule. And if you ask anyone who teaches discernment of spirits, if you say, what's the most important rule? Nobody's going to have an argument. 5 is it.
Right.
You might argue of some of the other ones. 13 is usually the second most important rule. But we'll when we come back to our next episode, we'll talk about rule the 5th.
Okay. Romans 16:20, the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus be with you. Amen.
Amen.